75 teams to go on my road to predict all 131 teams this college football offseason. And we're moving on to the Stanford Cardinal. And this, I feel like, could be one of the bigger surprises in 2022. That's not my prediction. You'll see my prediction in a little bit. But this is the Stanford team that went through a very poor effort last season. And ever since really making that Rose Bowl, way back when, I think 2016, somewhere around there, this Stanford team has kind of been down and not really been quite back up to that level. And a lot of people are starting to question the future of head coach David Shaw. So is this a team in Stanford that can push to make a bowl game and maybe even be a sneaky Pac-12 contender? Or is this going to be a Stanford team that is back to where they were last year and maybe we're looking for a new head coach in the offseason? What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate, and welcome to my channel. I'm predicting all 131 teams this college football offseason. Guys, that means I'm doing your favorite teams. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button, ring the bell to see when your favorite team gets uploaded. And to fans of the Stanford Cardinal out there, you guys are going to know this team a lot more than me. So if you feel like I missed something, you want to add something, anything of the sort, leave it in the comment section down below, and I'll be happy to see what you guys have to say. So let's talk about Stanford in 2022. This is my 8th ranked team in the Pac-12 coming into the 2022 college football season. And it's a Stanford team that, again, as mentioned, had a pretty poor effort last season. They were 3-9, 2-7 in conference, and overall just not a great football team. I mean, let's look at some stats here. Offensively, 302 yards per game with only 20.5 points per game. And on the defensive end, that was the second worst offense in the Pac-12, mind you, in terms of yards per game. And in terms of yards per game, this was the worst defense in the Pac-12, 451 yards per game and 32 points per game. It was also the worst scoring defense in the Pac-12. It was also the worst rush defense in the Pac-12. Now, the pass defense was pretty solid, around 215 yards per game. But on the ground, over 215 yards per game, around 235 more is the mark there for the Stanford Cardinals. So definitely some room for improvement on both sides of the ball. But I'll take a look and tell you why some areas may not be as big of a concern as others. But again, we'll get there. Under head coach David Shaw, this team is one of the leaders in returning production, and I couldn't really find a whole lot leaving. However, there are some big pieces that are leaving the Stanford Cardinal team. Nathaniel Peat and Austin Jones are two names that are both gone. So Nathaniel Peat and Austin Jones were the two running backs that by far got the most carries out of anyone in the Cardinal backfield last year. Nathaniel Peat had 404 yards and 3 touchdowns a season ago. And Austin Jones had 378 yards, and 2 touchdowns a season ago. Nathaniel Peat, 79 carries. Austin Jones, 107. So you're losing your 2 best running backs, as well as a guy that could have had a pretty solid role in 2022. That's Houston Haimuli, who I believe is transferred over to BYU. So Tucker Fisk, a defensive lineman, leaving, as well as Thomas Booker. Thomas Booker had 59 tackles and a sack and a half last season. Ryan Johnson, another defensive lineman, leaving as well. He had 15 tackles a season ago. Tucker Fisk had 2 sacks a season ago, was a tight end defensive line duo, but played mainly defensive line last year. Gabe Reed, probably the biggest loss on this team, though, with 62 tackles, half a sack, and an interception a season ago. And then Andres Fox, I believe a former 4-star, only had around 8-9 tackles last year, but he is also leaving and transferred out. But, again, the Stanford team is one of the leaders in returning production. Let's look at who they have coming back, shall we? Tanner McKee is a quarterback coming back that a lot of people project to be top 5 in the quarterback rankings coming in to the 2023 NFL draft class. Here's his stat line from last season. 2,327 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions for Tanner McKee a season ago. Granted, this passing offense only averaged around 215 yards per game last year. Now, not to the lack of talent and on Tanner McKee's part by all means, but it was a team that threw the ball more than it ran the ball. But again, the rushing offense, not great last year either. The offense in general just wasn't great. But this is a quarterback in Tanner McKee that I do really like, and I think can go possibly in the first round, but I think more likely than not, he is that second, third round quarterback, kind of like what we saw with Malik Willis this year going, I believe, to the Atlanta Falcons. So, again, Tanner McKee is a guy that I really like coming into next year, and he's got quite the plethora of weapons around him. Benjamin Eurosek is a tight end who is their leading receiver with 653 yards and 3 touchdowns. Elijah Higgins, 502 yards, 4 touchdowns. Bryson Tremaine is coming back as well. He had 5 touchdowns a season ago. Moody Rubin is a freshman coming in. John Humphreys, among some other guys that you could name there as well. There's a lot of talent at this wide receiver room, and I think Tanner McKee is going to have quite the amount of options when he is back in the pocket throwing the football. Otherwise, you have a running back there by the name of E.J. Smith that I think can have a solid season. Yeah, you lose Pete. Yeah, you lose Jones. And it might be a more one running back focused team this year with E.J. Smith. There are a couple other guys back there as well, but I think Smith is going to be really good for the Stanford Cardinal in 2022. On the defensive side, you got guys like David Bailey, Dolan Wade Perry, Stephon Heron, who's kind of a defensive linebacker combo, Lavani Damouni, who was the leading tackler last year, had 86 of them, a couple sacks. Ricky Meisen is coming back as well. By the way, David Bailey is a transfer coming in, as well as Patrick Fields, a transfer over from Oklahoma. Yeah, Patty Fields is coming over from Oklahoma, and that's a huge pickup for Stanford. Otherwise, they have another NFL caliber defensive back there in Kyu Blue Kelly. He had 11 passes defended, 2 interceptions, and ran one of them back for a pick 6 last year. Kendall Williamson. Guys, I could name so many more names on either side of the ball here. This is a very, very talented group. This is a good, talented group. But the question coming in is, do they have the coaching? Do they have the player development to kind of get back up and take that next step towards maybe making a bowl game? So let's look at this Stanford schedule. Non-conference, they have a home game against Colgate to open up the season. You figure they should be able to win that one there, right? But otherwise, I mean, the rest of this schedule, this is going to be a tricky road for the Stanford Cardinal. Notice there's no Colorado on the schedule. There's no Arizona on the schedule. There's no, besides Colgate, of course, there's no guaranteed game on the schedule for Stanford. So at home against Colgate, and then other 2 non-conference games, you have BYU at home to cap off the season. And in the middle there on November 15th, you have a road game against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Otherwise, when you get into Pac-12 play, your home games are against USC, Oregon State, Arizona State, Washington State, and then you have to go on the road to play Washington, Oregon, UCLA, Utah, and Cal. So kind of jumping a little bit into the schedule. USC, of course, is going to be revamped. Oregon with, back to USC, Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams, lots of depth at the wide receiver position. USC is going to be a very scary team, putting that lightly. Then you got to go on the road to play Oregon in there as well. On the road to play Washington. Figures to be an improved team in 2022. Oregon getting Dan Lanning, the defensive coordinator, or the old defensive coordinator, I should say, over from Georgia. And Georgia, well, won a national title last year. So Oregon football still going to be pretty solid in 2022. When you look down the line, there are a couple other landmine games. I mean, you got home games against Oregon State and Washington State, 2 teams that I think can pull off some upsets in their own building. Don't know about going on the road, but Stanford can pull off upsets there, beating Oregon State, Washington State. But they also have to go on the road to play UCLA and Utah. And, of course, on the road against Notre Dame as well. I know Notre Dame's got a lot of questions coming into this season, but that still figures to be a top 10 team here in 2022. And the one thing that I haven't mentioned about Stanford's schedule yet is we can talk about the games all they want. Look at where their bye week is. It is after the USC game. So you play Colgate, and then, bam, it's right into the game against USC. And then you have your bye week, and then it's a gauntlet after that, right? On the road at Washington, on the road at Oregon, 2 straight road games after the bye week. Then you play a tricky game at Oregon State. Then you got to go on the road to play Notre Dame. There's another tricky one at home. It's a lot of, as soon as that bye week and that 2-game road stretch ends, it's a lot of home, away, home, away. And the home games are winnable, and the road games are just really hard. Besides that road game against Cal, that's definitely a winnable game there for them. So let's kind of dive into percentages here. I don't do game-by-game predictions. I do a more percentage-based Alec Tell Me predict a team's record. So let's kind of look at it, shall we? If the game's in red, I just don't see you winning the game. If the game is in orange, I still don't see you winning the game. But it's college football and upsets can happen. Yellow are your 50-50 or high upset potential games. Games in yellow-green are games that you should win, but you got to watch out for teams on the other side of the ball. And then games in green are games that you should win and that I have you winning. So taking a look at the Stanford schedule here, your only real guarantee win, in my opinion, is that game against Colgate. Every other game here, toss it up, mix it around, boom. Stanford's obviously going to win more games than just that game against Colgate. At least you would hope so, right, with the talent that's coming back on this team. But there's a lot to worry about on this schedule. And most of the schedules in orange, I mean, USC, I think that's going to be a really, really good football team in 2022. Now, we're going to have to wait to see how Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams and everyone that transferred into that program does. But for USC, that's going to be a team that can contend for a Pac-12 title. Make no mistake about it. Same thing with Oregon, same thing with Utah, and maybe even to some sneaky extent, same thing with UCLA. UCLA is a sneaky team that I think are slipping under quite a bit of people's, not everyone's radar, because a lot of people think UCLA is going to be fairly good, but some people kind of aren't sure what to make about that UCLA team. And going on the road to play the Bruins, that's going to be a tough one for the Stanford Cardinal. Otherwise, when you look across the schedule here as well, I mean, that BYU game, BYU, also one of the top teams, if not the top team in returning production from 2022. You got Notre Dame that, has a lot of questions, but that still figures to be a top 10 team. Make no mistake, there are winnable games on the schedule for Stanford. If you want to look for wins, I mean, they can pull off an upset here. Sure, absolutely. But at home against Washington State, there's a little bit of a tricky one there. Even at home against Oregon State, still a little bit of a tricky game, but they can win either of them. At home against Arizona State, the Arizona State kind of in a dumpster fire situation right now, with Herm Edwards being that dog in the fire. And we'll see how the Sun Devils do this year. On the road against Washington, there's one as well if Washington doesn't pick up the pieces from where they were last season. But all in all, guys, this Stanford team is very interesting. And I'm higher on this Stanford team than most, I would say. But with that being said, I do think the Stanford Cardinals still come up just shy of a bowl game. I think Tanner McKee and this wide receiver group that returns a lot from last year is going to get them some wins. And I think E.J. Smith is going to be good enough on that running back side as well. The defense, you got some questions there, though, right? They brought in some transfers. David Bailey, Patrick Fields, transfers coming into this program to try to help revamp and turn this defense around. There are a couple of freshmen waiting back there as well. And when you look up and down this roster, a lot of juniors and seniors, although some freshmen, sophomores on this team as well. This is definitely going to be a very, very interesting Stanford team to watch. I think Tanner McKee and company are going to win them some games, but I have doubts about this defense, and Stanford, I think, just comes up short of making a bowl game. But that's my prediction for the Stanford Cardinal in 2022. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and anything you can. It really does help support the channel. And remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. I'll see all you guys in the next video. Goodbye.